Hello internet friends, and welcome to this blog post which is essentially a video blog which is taken from my Taking Territory blogs, and I'm just making this into a video companion piece. Have you heard about the latest viral TikTok trend where there's often young girls and women and they're asking their male counterparts and friends and husbands, do you think of the Roman Empire? And the answer is yes, men do, surprisingly frequently. Now, why would a man think about an empire that collapsed over 1600 years ago when he could be better served thinking about Love Island or the climate catastrophe, or maybe even helping his wife do the cleaning of the house? Now, I first heard about this trend whenever my daughter, about a week ago, sent me a text message just quite out of the blue saying, "Daddy, do you think about the Roman Empire?" And I answered, of course, in the affirmative, because I write a blog that thinks about empires of mind and body. And yes, the Roman Empire is something that does relatively frequently, strangely, enter my mind. And it's a really interesting question. Why do men think about empire? And I think over this last couple of days, thoughts have been percolating, and I think it comes for me, the conclusion is that men think routinely about civilisational advancement, and whether we like it or not, patriarchy is always going to be dominant. It's inevitable, and I think that we just have to choose whether we want to live under a benevolent one or indeed a sadistic one. And it might not be popular to admit this out loud, but I think men think about dominion all day long, sometimes in concrete terms and other times in more abstract ways. But for us, life is about building, it is about shaping, it is about hitting moving targets. It's just how we're hardwired to think. But why the Roman Empire though? And I think this is a tougher question to answer. And whenever I spoke to my other friends, they all admitted to thinking about empire and the Roman Empire. But other empires came to mind as well, such as the British Empire. And I think the reason behind this is that empire for men gives us a sense of dynamism and adventure. That's almost the link that's in our minds. And being part of a greater whole, being part of an exciting moment in history, rather than being a loose, disconnected, isolated ball bearing rattling around a purposeless system. And I think that's where most men find themselves today in the current environment. Now, I would have to say the Roman Empire, why is it always in my mind? Well, I think perhaps what I'm more interested actually in is the fall of the Roman Empire, because to an extent I believe that we're living in the Roman Empire version 2.0. There are a number of parallels. The Roman Empire was actually once something that was magnificent, but terrible at the same time, and it collapsed under the weight of its own excesses and regulations and taxes. And we're seeing elements of that now in our daily lives. And also as well, whenever we go back in history and you look at the early days of the empire, there was a vigor and a creativity, especially in its artwork and its craftsmanship. Towards the twilight of the empire, that slowly drifted out, and ultimately the empire ran out of steam and confidence. At its best, I think Rome represented a period of advancement, of order, of stability, opportunity, virtue, and it was a martial system into which men could embed themselves and they could see a role for themselves within society and how it would fit and how they contributed to it. Now, what has to be admitted is Rome definitely had its problems. It was a ruthless society. It was scheming, and human life and the dignity of human life counted for very little, and I'm sure that didn't help it continue. But men hunger for purpose. This is why we think about empire. And as we think about the West in which we live in at the moment, there is little to capture our imagination, is there? I mean, all there is this hollow corporatism and a system that tells us that our greatest strengths and virtues are an abomination and should be got rid of. It's interesting, I see a bit of a connection. It's not a perfect connection, but I see a bit of a connection to the historical story or the biblical story of Samson. And whilst he had his hair, he was a potent, dangerous and vigorous force. But once he gave up his secret, he was imprisoned and he was made a vassal. I think men today, we might feel a little bit like that captured Samson. We think back in time and we knew that there was a time when we had a sense of purpose. There was a place for us, there was a family mission, there was a community mission. And this required the very best of us, our physical, our mental, and our spiritual strength. There was a challenge to rise to. And sadly, I think, not fully understanding what they were doing, I think our fathers and our grandfathers, they gave away our birthright. And I think like the blinded Samson, we languish in a world that we don't recognize, that we can't make sense of. And we ache for vitality and vim and vigor. And I think this is what the empire represents in our minds. But here is, for me, the interesting question. If your empire could be established, who would be emperor? And by what standard would we all be governed? Would there be justice? Would there be peace? Who should we bow the knee to? And I think reflexively, especially if you were to talk to some younger men, they might demand that they would be made emperor, or even they might ask for an extremist Caesar like Andrew Tate. But I will wager that if this was the case, eventually Andrew Tate's yoke or their yokes would become heavier than we could all eventually bear. But here's the exciting thing. Did you know that there is a movement and a kingdom which is already on the march, which you can serve? And it's the King of Kings who's leading it. And the earth, as I said, as it says in Habakkuk, the earth is filling with the knowledge of his glory and the waters cover the sea. And he is looking for volunteers. Now, maybe you're listening to this and thinking, oh, Christianity, that's weak sauce for weak men. I would say this is the truest, highest, and noblest calling of any man's life. It is not about a soy face and a tambourine, should I have to dissuade you of that. It is about putting on armor. It is about fighting the battle wherever you're put. Sometimes you're warring against yourself, other times we are warring against powers and principalities of darkness. Sometimes we're holding the line, sometimes we're advancing to contact. But our aim and our responsibility is to always go that bit further with the flag that we were handed over and to put it that much further into enemy territory. And there is, of course, whenever you become a Christian, a price to pay. You have to give up the claim to your own life and you have to get on a mission. It's about a mission about doing good and shaping the world according to God's image, about how the world should be rightly ordered. And the cost will likely be high, but the reward will ultimately be great. But that is what you want, isn't it? You want a calling to something bigger, to something greater, to something beyond yourself. And this is the empire that I think about truly every waking moment of every day. Yeah, the Roman Empire gets an occasional thought, but only because it pales into insignificance in comparison to the kingdom of Christ. And that is the kingdom in which I serve as a soldier every single day. And I wouldn't change a thing about it.